go out the doors that way, we also can. I am Edith Callahan from Acadia University, and I was trained in the Climate Reality Project by Al Gore this summer down in Chicago. So tonight I'm going to give a brief, very condensed version of Al Gore's 2-hour presentation, and then we'll turn it over to the candidates. So I also want to thank the candidates who were able to show up tonight. So we have Jim Morton from Kings North, NDP, and Sheila Richardson from Green Party Kings South, Mary Lou Harley, Green Party Kings North, and Keith Irving, Liberal from Kings South. The PCs declined to come tonight, so here is what we have. I also want to thank Anna Maria Galante. She was the person who helped organize this, actually largely organized this, and I want to thank NSCC for allowing us to use their facilities. Also, I want to recognize Brian Cottam from Wild Lupin Media. He is live streaming for NS Live, nslive.tv tonight, and also you could replay it if you'd like to. So without further ado, we will carry on with the presentation. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay, and you can see this. So here we are on our little planet. Beautiful planet as it is, but as we have heard yet again from the IPCC, the planet is heating up. They just published their 5th assessment. It came out yesterday, and I only drew out 2 of their many conclusions. Warming of the climate system is unequivocal. Human influence on the climate system is clear. So there is no doubt in their mind that this is a big problem that we're facing. In the last 20 years, we have experienced the 12 warmest years on record. And in Australia, January 4th, 2013, they were forecasting some pretty hot weather, but then their forecast for just 10 days later, they had to actually put 2 new degrees. They had to add new colors to their map. Things were getting so hot there. So it's definitely heating up, and we know that there is a relationship between the heat and CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere. So for the last 800,000 years, we've hovered just below 280 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere, and this has tracked fairly close to temperature. So there's a relation between CO2 in the atmosphere and our Earth's temperature. Now, however, our CO2 has gone up to 400 parts per million. And if we keep going on at this level for the next 40 years, we will be up to 600 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere. Some people have looked at this and said, oh, yes, well, we understand what you're talking about, but really, the temperature hasn't gone up too, so this is not an issue anymore. Well, we understand also that there's a bit of a delay effect, and in fact, looking at the data, we can see that the temperature is continuing to shift. So here we have a baseline from 1951 to 1980, and we can see if we look then from 81 to 91, the temperature is shifting for more hotter days. And I don't know if you can see this color down here, but this is extreme heat down here. It's getting bigger, more extreme heat days. That's 91 to 2001, and here 2001 to 2011. The extreme temperature events used to cover 0.1% of the Earth. Now they cover 10%. Okay, so the world is heating up. It also leads to extreme weather events. So James Hansen said, the deadly European heat wave of 2003, the fiery Russian heat wave of 2010, and catastrophic droughts in Texas and Oklahoma last year can each be attributed to climate change. This is significant because for years scientists have said, well, yes, we'll have more extreme weather events, But no one came out and said, yes, this is linked to climate change. And now people are beginning to say, oh, actually, we can't rule anything out. We are seeing that weather events are linked to climate change. This is Munich Re. Bill Zimmerman talked about them earlier. German reinsurance company, they're very concerned about climate change. The only plausible explanation for the rise in weather-related catastrophes is climate change. So here's the link between climate and weather events. The hydrocycle is what's driving it. Warmer air holds a lot more water vapor. With each additional 1 degree of temperature in the atmosphere's capacity to hold water increases by 7%. There's already 4% more water vapor over the ocean than there was 30 years ago. So the hydraulic cycle, there's evaporation, precipitation, water returns to the sea, and then it goes again. But the more water that evaporates, the faster this cycle runs, and the more extreme weather events we have. So we have increased global mean temperature, we have increased temperatures of the ocean, and consequently, increased heavy precipitation days. So the rainstorms, the snowstorms are getting bigger and more intense and causing more frequent floods. So it's not nice rainy days anymore, it's major weather events at this point. And here's what some of the floods look like. And I know some of you have seen these on TV. Here we are in Pakistan, in the Philippines, all across the world, in China, India, Taiwan, Korea, North Korea, Argentina. This one's horrifying in Greece, Czech Republic, Germany. I imagine some of you have been to some of these places. Austria and Canada, of course, last summer in Alberta and Toronto. So the same heat that causes evaporation from the ocean also causes evaporation from the land, leading to increased drought conditions. So while we're having these intense weather events and lots of flooding, we're also having droughts. So here's drought in Indiana, Macedonia. They're all across the world. Spain, I just have a few pictures to show. In France, Switzerland, not known for its drought conditions necessarily. 2010 drought in the Amazon reduced the greenness of approximately, over 900,000 square miles of vegetation in the Amazon. So that the lungs of the earth, as we have heard them referred to, are also suffering greatly from this drought. Climate model projections suggest that that what we consider today to be an episode of severe drought might even be classified as a period of abnormal wetness by the end of the century. And that a coming mega drought, so there's this new language of the mega drought, a prolonged multi-decade period of significantly below average precipitation is possible and likely in North American West. Here's a climate model projection for drought conditions. So from 2000 to 2009, here's what we had for drought conditions, and the very dry is in the purple here, or the lavender. 2030 to 2039, 60 to 69, getting pretty hot, 90 to 99. So it gets worse, right? I mean, things get worse. People say, oh, we're locked into climate change, there's nothing we can do. Well, that might be true, but that's no reason to keep spewing stuff into the atmosphere, because it will, in fact, continue to get worse. And of course, hot weather is related to fires, and I'm afraid that you can't really see that well. Let me just turn this down a bit. Brian, are you okay with that? Nah? All right. tech guy doesn't like it anyway. This graph shows increased events of fires across the world, within the U.S. So again, we've seen these in the news. Here's fires in Spain, Montenegro, Australia, and they're causing great human harm and human suffering. Hello, Anna Maria. and suffering of wildlife also. Oklahoma. Colorado also, it's worth mentioning the particulates, increased particulates in the air. Singapore had huge increase of weather-related illnesses and air quality illnesses due to their forest fires. And all of this is coming up to our neck of the woods too, if forest fires down south. So following on to that, all of this leads to problems within vulnerable systems that we rely on. Our food supply I'll talk about first. A biologist in Illinois said, "It's like farming in hell," was the quote that he gave in 2012. A farmer in Syria said, "I had 400 acres of wheat and now it's all desert." In Russia, 2010, there were wild forest fires leading to states of emergency being declared across 27 regions in Russia. Interestingly, 4 months later, the world food price reached record highs after Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan halted their exports after record droughts and fires. So, the FAO Food Price Index shows 2 spikes in the last 3 years in food prices. So this is coming home to hit us economically also. In Britain, 2013, the wheat crops were devastated by wet autumns and a cold spring. So their Agriculture and Horticultural Development Board said normally we export around 2.5 million tons of wheat, but this year we are expected to have to import the same. Where are they getting it from? Well, that's the question. This is a graph from The Economist that showed food surplus and deficit around the world from 65 to 2010. And, while in North America and South America, we're still in a food surplus, there's lots of places in the world where they're in quite a deep deficit and increasing deficit. This is a green revolution, result of green revolution, and we can debate the problems of that, but whatever it is, I think it's useful to look at this aggregated data to see really what's happening around the world with food. A Stanford University professor said, "I think there's been an under-recognition of just how sensitive crops are to heat and how fast heat exposure is increasing." So current research indicates that for every day during the growing season that temperatures go above 29 degrees Celsius, corn yields decline by 0.7%. This is, again, worth mentioning because so many people I've heard say, "Oh, well, more heat, that's great. We'll get more crop rotations. We'll get more, food coming up. More plants love CO2, more CO2, more plants." But the science is showing that that's not necessarily true. By the end of the century, U.S. corn yields could fall by 1/3 from the heat stress alone. There's also a problem with increased pests related to climate change. So, study of CO2 in soybeans, aphids and Japanese beetles were drawn more to plants in a raised elevated CO2 conditions. Beetles that fed on high CO2 leaves lived longer and laid more eggs. The high CO2 levels also lowered the plant's natural defenses, making them virtually helpless. So there are definite problems related to this. In relation to water, we rely on water for our agriculture. 70% of our water is devoted to agriculture. So here we are in Saudi Arabia growing wheat in the desert, and it's pretty remarkable that they're able to do this. This is an interesting picture. Let me back up for a second. It starts off showing you in 1997, this was a basin in Saudi Arabia, 91, 2000, 2012. So you can really see how through irrigation they're growing crops, but they're also drying up their rivers and lakes. In Kansas, at the current rate of depletion, 35% of the southern high plains will be unable to support irrigation within the next 30 years. And in Africa, they're already utilizing available water at the maximum possible rate. So we're putting a lot of stress on our water system. This is Bangladesh, where the flooding from sea level rise is causing salination of their once arable land. And it's happening all across African nations, in Egypt, in India, and in China. Problems. So here are existing water supply. We have an increased demand within the next 20 years, really. We have access to some more water. We can increase efficiency a bit, yet there's still a gap. There's still a remaining gap between what our projected needs are and what we'll be able to attain. And finally, global health. Climate change is disrupting natural ecosystems in a way that is making life better for infectious diseases. Here we have West Nile virus spreading around the world, Rift Valley fever, chikungunya. I'm not sure I pronounced that disease correctly. Somebody for the audience can correct me. Chagas disease, cryptococcus, and dengue fever. Some people look at this and say, well, we're flying all over the world, and of course these are spreading. And well, that's true for sure. They're spreading also because they're finding hospitable environments elsewhere, and the warm environment is making it more hospitable for them. So in Mumbai, the incidence of dengue fever rose by almost 176% since 2008-9, while malaria cases have increased by 71%. In Texas, people were calling 911 because they were getting bitten by mosquitoes. It was causing hysteria. People were so upset about the prospects of getting disease from mosquitoes, and 911 had to put out notices saying, stop calling us if you get bitten by a mosquito. There's nothing we can do to help you. Finally, in terms of health, there's going to be an increased pollen count is projected. So in 2000, grains of pollen per cubic meter were just over 8,000. By 2014, they're projected to be up over 21,000. So I don't know how many people here have allergies, but this, I guess, would be significant to you. Now, so all the bad news, right? It's a problem. We caused the problem. And it is a severe problem, but we also have solutions at hand. So there is wind. I know wind is contentious around here, but all across the world, windmills are going up. People are using wind power quite a bit around the world. India plans to quadruple renewable energy generation by 2022. Mexico and the US, and there's also solar facilities. This facility in California will be powered up to power 140,000 homes. Production of photovoltaic is increasing around the world. Installations in the US have been increasing, and at the same time, of course, as that increases, price goes down. So this is all good for us. From Africa, kids using photovoltaics to run their computers, to Britain, to the Vatican. These over 1,000 cells here power all of the heat, all of the electricity, all of the air conditioning for the Vatican. It's pretty impressive. A few countries have carbon policies. I don't see North America lit up that well. China's president has said green and sustainable development represent the trends of our time. Barack Obama, as president, as father, and as an American, I'm here to say we need to act. He was talking about climate change there. I didn't have any quote from our own leader that I could put up there, so I didn't. And here's our Earth, right? Here we go. There's nowhere else to go. That's it. That's what we have. So that's what we want to protect. So here we are, back to Earth. Now, back to Earth, I want to ask our party candidates to come down here. I have 2 questions for you. Well, I'd like you to respond to these 2 questions as we discussed at the beginning, and then we'll open it up to the audience to ask more questions if time permits and if there's interest. So the questions are, in what ways do you think Nova Scotia could respond more effectively to this climate reality? And then secondly, oops, that's supposed to be a 2. As a Kings County MLA, what could be done locally to respond to this climate reality? So if you wouldn't mind coming on down and responding, and I'll go back to the audience. For the live stream, if you could speak into the microphone, that would be wonderful. Yeah, I realized that. So I didn't have an order in mind in the beginning, so we could just start from 1 to 2 and go down. Thank you very much. Four political candidates and no one's grabbing a microphone first. That's something wrong, I know.
Do you want to go first?
Episode of politeness.
We'll go from left to right.
Well, from what Edith... is it on?
It is on, it's just for the live stream.
Okay, thank you. From what Edith was telling us just now, it's clear that climate change isn't just about getting warmer. It isn't just about our energy choices. It's the whole carbon cycle. It's the whole water cycle. We are entering a very broad topic when we look at climate change. Agriculture, energy security, food security, forestry, job security, poverty, water security, all of these things are touched by climate change. And for Nova Scotia, we have a huge coastline. And so that is another consideration for us in terms of protection of our coastal areas. In a very general sense, there are 2 aspects that we are looking at. One is our energy choices and inefficiencies, and the other is the way we have used the living surface of the planet. In combination, they have resulted in levels of carbon dioxide that are abnormally high. Just addressing the energy choices will not get us where we need to be. We also need to address the fact that we are generating biologically impoverished areas at a huge rate. And what Edith also showed us with climate change is that that is going to be even more of a problem. The very fact that we've affected the climate is going to generate additional impoverished biological areas. This is one of the reasons why we look at agriculture and forestry as well as looking at energy in terms of what can happen in Nova Scotia. To make that clear, in energy we're looking at efficiencies and conservation, and we're looking at alternative energy sources based on renewable energy. The Green Party also recommends that we not engage in mega energy projects because they are nearly always associated with mega environmental damage and significant social disruption. We think the better way to go in Nova Scotia is to try to decentralize our energy, to try to encourage individual, community, and business self-sufficiency in energy. In that way, we can choose renewable options that are the appropriate scale for decentralization, which is one of the reasons that the Green Party is very concerned about large-scale wind turbines. It's not so much the size as it is the appropriateness in their siting. And it's not individuals always, but the arrays. The indirect health impacts from large wind turbine arrays have been reported globally and dismissed for too long. And we are in a situation where epidemiologically we cannot ignore the fact that large arrays of large-scale wind turbines are being reported to have significant indirect health impacts. And so for Nova Scotia, the province really has to take some responsibility for setting the framework for regulating the design and the siting. And then within that framework, municipalities can make decisions as to what's appropriate for their area. The way it is right now, it's being left completely for the municipalities. They're scrambling to get investment. There's insufficient information available at the level that some of the councillors can feel comfortable making decisions on that particular energy source. And that's an example of how we are going to proceed as we look at renewable energies. We need guidance at the provincial level that set the framework, and we need some flexibility within that for municipalities to make the decisions. But the focus needs to be in decentralizing and enabling self-sufficiency in individuals and communities and businesses. When I include something like forestry, when we look at our forestry policies, we haven't really thought carefully about maintaining a biologically diverse stand when we're finished. We've allowed too much clear cutting. We've not taken advantage of a lot of the hardwoods. Things have been turned over very much to softwood pulpwood. We need to start to redirect our forestry to allow a lot more development of high-end value products from the forest, selective harvesting from the forest, and rewards to the woodlot owners for using the most sustainable methods so that the forests remain to have their natural function, which is within our biologically diverse system for Nova Scotia, one of our main systems in terms of helping to restore the carbon dioxide balance is to maintain our healthy forests. Having a large coastline means we also have a responsibility to the ocean aquatic environment. And we cannot continue to just dump poisons into our coastal waters thinking that it's some big toilet flushing system, because we are reducing the productivity of our inland waters, and our shorelines, and that whole area is becoming more and more under pressure. And as the stresses increase from climate change on our coastal areas, we have got to take proactive strategies now to start to control how we are going to protect that coastal area, including protecting it from human activities. And I'm going on a long time. I'm sorry. I'll pass the microphone.
Thank you, Mary Lou, and hello, everybody. First, I guess I'd like to say thank you both to the college, to Isabel for the paper, to Edith for the presentation, and for going to Chicago to get ready for this, and to Anna Maria for doing such organizing to get us here. This is certainly a very important topic, and I think a complex one. It's useful that we're here tonight having interestingly, a dialogue in a very political moment. But we probably need to continue to have this discussion, not just tonight, not just during an election, but beyond it. I've had, over the last decade, a lot of conversations with folks who live in Kings North and beyond. And I know that we have a variety of objectives. It's easy to talk with people about the need to do things that sustain our planet. But, people also want development, they want jobs. We have a mix of goals that we have to somehow come to terms with, I think, and that's what makes it complex, and that's probably why we need the dialogue, so we can find some way forward together. During the last 4 years, I've had the privilege, I think it's certainly been a privilege to me, to be part of a government that's been very interested in these things. Mary Lou has been talking a little bit about energy and the need to go beyond that, but certainly, and I think we've done it, but certainly energy has been a big part of our government's focus. We set a target. We actually increased the target that was that's now in place to produce 40% of our electricity by renewable means by 2020. That's a pretty big goal, and part of the way of reaching that has been through the development of wind energy, and through one of the ways that we hope to reach that is through the Muskrat Falls development and the Maritime Link. And what's motivated us to move in that direction has certainly been the impact of using fossil fuels on our environment. The other thing that's motivated us is that we know that escalating costs are a huge social problem, an economic problem for people in this province, for individuals and for business as well. We have set some hard caps on greenhouse emissions, and in fact, one of the outcomes of that was that the David Suzuki Foundation recognized Nova Scotia as being one jurisdiction that had made one of the most promising investments in climate change in Canada. We've been trying very hard, and this is where I think wind energy and some other things come into place, to engage communities and individuals in developing a range of renewable energy options. We've done that primarily through the Community Feed-in Tariff program, and also through creating more opportunities for individuals to create energy and use the grid to be more self-sustaining through net metering. And those energy sources might include wind. That's probably been the large one to date. They can include solar or smaller scale hydro, and some smaller scale tidal energy. That's been, I think, a source of a whole lot of discussion here in Kings County. Maybe that's question 2 somewheres, but that's part of where I think we need to have more dialogue as we go forward. And I know Mary Lou in one way or another referred to this quite a bit, but we created Efficiency Nova Scotia in large part because we understand how important conservation is to finding a better place. And that goal of finding a way to reduce our demands, I think, is critical to wherever we decide to go. And Efficiency Nova Scotia is one of those vehicles that has been helping with that. I have a list of things here that I just want to keep them in some order that's relevant to, I guess, to warming the planet, the warming of the planet. I guess I want to say, maybe just as an overview comment too, I don't think there's been anybody in my government, in the government that I've been part of this past 4 years, who's questioned whether the planet's warming. I think we know that, we've understood that from the beginning. It's been an assumption on which we based our work. We adopted the United Nations target of finding a way to preserve 12% of Nova Scotia's landmass. And I'm really happy to say that that at this point, given the kind of trajectory we're on, that we expect that by 2015, 13% of Nova Scotia's landmass will be protected land. And I think part of what feeds into that overall thinking has been our eager willingness to buy land and through Nova Scotia. Through the one of the difficulties that we dealt with was the pulp and paper mill on the South Shore in Liverpool, the Bowaters Mersey mill. But it led to purchasing quite a large amount of land which I think that it becomes a kind of carbon sink as opposed to something that's producing more carbon. And we've now got, and I don't know how much people have been paying attention to this, probably the most progressive clear-cutting strategy in Canada. We've committed ourselves to reducing the amount of clear-cutting in Nova Scotia by 50% over the next 5 years. I'm sitting here thinking that we still need to keep working at that, but it's a very good beginning. We recently, as late as this summer, completed a plan to eliminate whole tree harvesting, which means that when harvesting occurs, you need to leave parts. So, like this seems almost a foregone conclusion to me, but you need to leave the stump and limbs of cutting in the forest to allow for regeneration of growth. And we've made significant investments in silviculture activity, encouraging local landowners to use better methods to harvest to manage their forests and harvest them. This is relatively complicated in Nova Scotia because most of Nova Scotia's forest is privately owned. So it's not so easy to simply say this is the way it'll be done. In fact, much of Nova Scotia's forest is owned by absentee landlords who perhaps haven't seen their property in their whole lifetime. Might live in Toronto or whatever, but own land here. So it's one of those complications. We and I think just maybe I'll just mention one other thing, then pass the mic along. But we've also been interested in how agriculture can fit into this. I'm really pleased that we've been able over this last 4 years to encourage I think an increasing diversity among farms. Nova Scotia was the only province last year that had an actual growth in the number of farms in Canada. Many of them were small farms, of course, and sometimes I hear at least kind of the corporate agriculturalists dismiss that growth. But in my view, the growth of small farms it creates a higher degree of diversity in terms of what's produced. And many of the small farmers are interested in alternative approaches to agriculture. They're probably more organic farmers among that mix. They're helping provide good quality products to local markets, and all of those things reduce the carbon footprint I think in our community, because it means that there's less need to transport those products over great distances. Again, we've got a long ways to go, but it seems to me that development is an encouraging one, and one that we would like to continue fostering. There might be more that could be said, but I'll pass that along.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks, Edith, for your presentation. I think a lot of good things have been said, so I'll try not to repeat that so much. One of the things that I just like to share with you is I'm off of about almost 6,000 doors that I've knocked on over the last 4.5 months, with about a 50% hit rate. So I've had about 3,000 conversations with people in Kings South. Not one person has asked about climate change. Not one. Not one. And I think that's where our real challenge lies. If you look at the platforms, NDP, Liberal, to be honest, I haven't looked at the Green platform in detail, but they are short on detail on climate change. There are words there and a belief that these issues are important, but there's not a lot of dollars associated with things. We have a province that not only has a big environmental debt, it has a big fiscal debt. And that, I think, is the challenge when we start talking about working regionally or locally with respect to dealing with climate change. People are struggling out there, and it's not their reality. And I think one of the challenges we face is to bring that reality to all of Nova Scotians. I lived in the Arctic for many years, and I participated in the Municipal Leaders Forum on Kyoto, and delivered a speech at the end of the conference that was well received because it was real and it touched people. And when you have fellow councillors losing both legs by going through the ice in minus 30 because of climate change, it becomes very real. The Arctic was the canary in the coal mine. we're not in the coal mine. We're a little bit further. And I think a piece of work that we should be doing regionally and locally are finding the stories that make it real for Nova Scotia. And I think they are out there in terms of storm effects, eroding coastlines, but I don't think we've done a good enough job of making those stories real in the forefront of Nova Scotians. There is both government action, which Jim has spoken about, and I support all of those initiatives with some modifications here and there, but these are all good stuff. But we also need to change individual behavior, and I think that's the real challenge for us as a society. I know that person. That's the challenge for our society, and that's again to make behavioral change. So we have to find ways to make the stories real and to move to individual behavioral changes. And I'm as guilty as anyone of not really making behavioral changes the way that we all have to do on this planet. And I think that's a particular challenge that we have. In terms of some of the things that we can do regionally, I believe one of the fundamental flaws right now in the Sustainable Prosperity Act, I've got the words lost on the name of it, but is there's nothing on land use. There's nothing about land use, and that is one of the most critical elements in sustainability in my mind. And we have conflicts within this region with agricultural land, development, siting of gravel pits, wind, etc. And we need a provincial framework for land use, and that would begin to resolve some of these conflicts before we get into dealing with these issues on a project-by-project basis. And we end up with a difficult discussion at the municipal level dealing with NIMBY. So we need to broaden that lens and look at things more at a regional level. I think municipal cooperation is an area that we're heading. Talking about it at Kings County, I really see that expanding the Annapolis Valley. Policies that we develop municipally don't stop at the Kings-Annapolis border, and we should be looking at our geographic land use and working together in developing strategies to find the best use of our precious resources, i.e. land. And I think somewhat associated with this in terms of bringing common understanding to citizens in the Annapolis Valley might be something like a regional energy plan, to have a more fully understanding of where our energy comes from and what does it cost and what is the economic impact for us purchasing energy, whether it's from Quebec Hydro, Newfoundland, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, the U.S. Bringing an understanding to the people that these are economic dollars lost when we're not generating our own energy might help in those discussions and when we're struggling with where to put a wind farm. I think there's details I can get into, but I think those are the broad points that I'd like to make. So I'll pass it on to Sheila.
Okay, thanks very much, Anna-Marie Galante and Edith Callahan, for organizing this. It's a very complex topic. Where to start? 2004, I was asked to go to Halifax for an interview to be the Green Party organizer. And it was the time of White One. So I was in Wolfville digging out my car. And I couldn't get from the front door to the car. I had to go from the back door. So I had to dig my way to the car, and then I had to dig round the car. And I had to ask the fireman across the street. I lived on Locust Avenue at the time. I had to ask him to dig out the snow from the front door so that I could open the front door. Maria White and Henry Hoaxma arrived, and the three of us were going to this meeting in Halifax, the Holiday Inn. And I still hadn't dug my way out, so they helped me. It was I have photos of it, how much snow there was. We got to Halifax, and they had only cleared one lane, so the buses and car couldn't pass. We had a meal at the Holiday Inn. There were 18 Green Party people that arrived. And they had to rearrange the whole menu because the trucks hadn't come in with the food. It was a real eye-opener of what can happen when the climate affects our lives. I was going to take a ride with Henry and Maria, but I'm glad I took my car because I was supposed to work afterwards and the buses weren't running, so I couldn't have got to work if I hadn't taken my car. So climate has a major impact on us in Nova Scotia, and it's there all around us. There was major flooding in Truro and in Halifax, and I remember there was real community spirit because my son was on Roby Street and the trees had been ripped up, and people couldn't. They didn't have electricity, so they couldn't keep their food, so they were cooking it. Restaurants were cooking it and giving it away. So it was real community spirit. My daughter was up in Clayton Park, and she was in an apartment building. So they had no elevators. They had to walk down the stairs with no lights. There are a lot of students who were making the decision whether to stay or to leave because there was no power. I went in, and the whole of Connaught, one side of it was full of tree debris, and the other side it was 2 lanes of traffic. Quimpool, the lights weren't working. The restaurants weren't open. So it's a major catastrophe. I think people did what they could, and they helped each other out. But there were complaints after a week of no power. How can we do this better? That was 2004. We're still using fossil fuels. We're still using Nova Scotia Power. We're making attempts at wind turbine. The Green Party would suggest that we have tax benefits to bring in solar power to your home or bring in wind power. The reality is that if you are middle class or rich, you can probably afford. In 2006, I bought my house in Wolfville, and I had second source power come from Windsor, and they said it would cost $25,000 to put in the photovoltaic tubes. I didn't have $25,000. I just bought my house. So we need grants to enable people to change how we use power. I have something that my friend Madeline Taylor sent me, and I think Jim Norton has spoken to this about reducing emissions because Nova Scotia Power is creating a large amount of the emissions and greenhouse gases. We have within our power, we can use solar power. We can use wind power. We have to make sure, as Mary Lou said, that we put in place reasonable distance from people so that there aren't any health risks with the large wind turbines. So there have to be, I guess we have to make mistakes and learn from them, and we have to share those mistakes within Nova Scotia. Some of those decisions are made on the municipal level, and some of them are made on the provincial level. And the provincial government probably needs to come in with some stronger measures. The reality that we live in at the moment is that we have a Conservative government with Stephen Harper. He's not only, he's not actually keeping up with Kyoto agreements. He's going way below. He's going completely against the direction I think the 4 candidates here believe we should be going in. And it's interesting that Conservatives aren't here tonight. But even though we don't have a federal government that is moving in the direction that we want, we can still make a difference in our local backyard, and we can still make a difference provincially. Yes, the federal funds would make a huge difference, but we as individuals can make those differences. The Green Party would help people set up solar panels. They would help set up turbines. They would ensure that there were some rules and regulations around the wind power. I believe it's in everybody's interest. It's not actually, I don't see it as a party issue. I see it as everybody. We all have to live together. We all have to live in this planet. We all have to live in a planet that's heating up, and we all have to live in an area where the greenhouse gas emissions are getting worse. It's across party lines to me. It's beyond party lines. We have to work together. I believe the Green Party has actually taken people from Conservatives, from the Liberals, and from the NDP, because we all believe that we have to live on this planet together. We have to make decisions together that make sense for us.
Thank you, everyone. What I'd like to do now is open it up to questions from the audience. If anyone wants to ask a more specific question of one of the candidates or all of the candidates, I would like to do that. And I'm going to give you the microphone so we have it recorded. Mary Lou?
I'm not sure whether we were all just responding to question 1.
Well, it kind of varied. Some of you mentioned, some of you were more on one, some of you went to both. And I could take the time to have you go all through and do number 2, but I would rather at this point turn it over to the audience just in the interest of time. Question? I do have a timer. Yeah, that would probably be a good idea. We do have to be out of here by 9:30, and that was our agreement. And probably some of you want to be out of here maybe even earlier than that. But I know that some of you might have some specific questions. So maybe if we could keep the answers to, 3 minutes? 3 minutes would be good. Is this a yes hand? It's a question. It's a question?
We used to refer to natural gas as a transition fuel to a green economy, but unfortunately that was in 1980. And now as we look at natural gas, we realize that natural gas is a much worse greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, and that leakage rates of as little as 3% in natural gas systems make it worse than burning coal. So what is your attitude toward the, quote, potential, close quote, of natural gas in Nova Scotia? And that would obviously include the most likely source, which would be fracking.
You want to start on the table again?
Whoever has a ready answer.
Yes.
Did you use the microphone, please?
Sorry. The Green Party is opposed to fracking. We feel that there should be a permanent moratorium on fracking in Nova Scotia, and that there should be a ban on the import of fracking wastes from other areas into Nova Scotia. It's just environmentally not a sound process. Natural gas we don't recognize as the transition at this point. We're very keen that we look at the German model of photovoltaic on individual use, and would like to have that seriously explored. In the German situation, the concern is more, can the system continue to handle all the feed-in coming from the voltaics, because it has been so successful to have individual application of photovoltaics at the residential level. And we think that has great potential for Kings North, as well as for the province. I will pass on now. Is that answer your question, Bill? I'll pass on and save that minute for someone else.
That's an interesting observation, Bill. So I appreciate you. I need to do some more homework. Our general position around natural gas has been that it's another fossil fuel. And so our emphasis on wind and tidal research our emphasis on hydroelectricity have all been about moving us away from fossil fuels. I don't have the expertise that you do in terms of what's more dangerous than something else, but we've seen a role for natural gas. In fact, one of the pieces of legislation that we passed is allowing the trucking of compressed natural gas from one location to another. Acadia University has made a conversion from using bunker C to natural gas, which will save them a lot of money, they hope. I guess time will tell whether that's possible. But our view is that we need to move to renewables. And if I could make a comment about price of natural gas, there doesn't appear to be, if you look at the last few months, any good savings in terms of natural gas anyway. The prices have spiked quite a bit. So it appears to us, at least, to be not in any sense a good option. Now, mind you, the Progressive Conservative Party, which is not here tonight, has been suggesting that one of our ways to the future is to use more natural gas and to freeze power rates for 5 years. We've thought for a long time that we've already had lots of time to get started. We need to move on. The other thing that hasn't been said here tonight, I think, which seems to me to be really relevant, is that about 57 to 58% of our electricity is now generated by coal. I guess we all know that in this room, but the goal, from my point of view, is to reduce the amount of coal that we use, and that means we need to have more discussions about wind and hydro of different kinds, and certainly solar, as Mary Lou says. In fact, the Department of Energy has been looking at using the COMFIT program in relation to solar. So I'm hoping we can make some progress there.
Thank you. As usual, Bill, you present us with new information, as Jim has pointed out, in terms of the concerns with natural gas. Certainly, I can answer the question with respect to fracking, and the Liberal Party has been supportive and called for several years ago an indefinite moratorium on fracking, unless it can be independently proven to be completely safe for us, and I think most people are in doubt that it can be proven, and has called for and been advocating for several years a ban on the importation of fracking waste, and being from the municipal world and hearing the municipalities struggling with that waste, it's quite alarming and concerning. So I think that's the long and short answer.
Mary Lou has already said the Green Party is against fracking. In Kennett-Cook, there were workshops put on, and it's very clear that there are chemicals used in the drilling and the pressure, and then there are contaminants that come up through the shale, uranium, radon, and various chemicals that we have no control over. And then what you do with that wastewater that has all these chemicals in it. So it's very clear to the Green Party that we are against fracking, and we call for a moratorium on that. And we don't want the wastewater brought from any other province, because we don't want to have to dispose of it either. So it's not in our backyard, I guess. Yeah, I think we just have to put money into wind and solar and tidal, and we have to look for different ways of finding energy in this province, and also reducing our consumption. It's not it's actually not a popular thing when the Green Party say that less is more. We have to actually reduce consumption. We have to turn off lights, we have to insulate lofts, we have to replace windows, we have to insulate walls. I leave it at that.
Here.
Just on the subject of conservation, and I'm really directing this to the Liberal candidate, we know that Efficiency Nova Scotia is doing good work. You talked about the need for educating people. Efficiency Nova Scotia is doing good work right now, showing people, teaching people how to use less energy And yet your party seems to have taken a stand to give the funding, make the funding for Efficiency Nova Scotia go back to Nova Scotia Power, which doesn't seem to me can have any incentive to reduce the amount of power that people are buying from it. So how do you jibe those two things?
I think what the Liberal Party is saying is just rather than it coming off our bills, it should be coming out of Nova Scotia Power's profits. I think that's the bottom line, is that it should be, you know, a direct charge to Nova Scotia Power and be not funded from the ratepayers' tax bills. No, it's they're funding it, they're not controlling it.
Hi, I think in this room there could be a lot of agreement about the advantages and the preferableness of using hydro versus coal. That's pretty obvious. So, and I'm just curious if, depending on your opinion, if you could just tell us what's right and what's wrong, or what's wrong, about the Muskrat Falls deal, given how significant that would be in terms of the energy and the carbon footprint, or the energy strategy for the province and the carbon footprint for Nova Scotians as a whole. So either what you think potentially is right about that deal and what you think is wrong.
Well, thank you for the question. I certainly what we think is right about the deal, and the Utility and Review Board appears to have agreed with us, except that it's asked both Nova Scotia Power and Newfoundland and Labrador Power to look at pricing on surplus electricity that might be created. But what's right about it is that it will provide, among the portfolio of energy sources, a portion, maybe about I think it's 8 to 10% of our overall mix of energy. And that will help further reduce our dependence on coal. That seems to me to be a good thing. Now, of course, building a dam and building more infrastructure also has a cost to the environment, but we think that certainly is outweighed by the advantages. And there's a cost, you know, if I could just say one additional thing about sort of, because price is a part of all this too. And I think, you know, Keith's point earlier about getting buy-in from into us as individuals somehow has to be, this has to matter to people where they live and how they live. I talk to a lot of people at doorsteps too, and I know that people are generally concerned about energy rates. They feel helpless in some ways about what's happening. They know they need heat. They want light when they flip the switch. They don't know how to manage that bill so well. And I think there's a lot of hope that we can bring the cost down. I'm not convinced personally that we're in a situation where we can significantly reduce costs. What we can hope for more is price stability. I think that's where we have to get to, and we have to be honest about that.
The Green Party is very concerned about the Muskrat Falls. This is another situation where a mega project is going to have mega environmental and social impacts. The Joint Review Panel assessing the Lower Churchill Falls project found the project did not meet the criteria for sustainability. There was no clear economic case for the project and no clear positive environmental gain that would offset the significant environmental and cultural impacts. The project would destroy habitat for threatened caribou herds, result in a loss of aquatic biodiversity, and generate unsafe mercury levels in food, fish, and seals, and complete destruction of locations that have spiritual and cultural significance to the indigenous of the area. Given the destruction of the Grand River ecosystem, the risk to the health of the downstream communities caused by the elevated mercury levels, the lack of valid consultation with the indigenous peoples, the Green Party rejects Muskrat Falls. If Muskrat Falls was happening in this province instead of somewhere else, we would be viewing it very differently. Because the impacts are going to be outside of our province, we are not taking a serious look at the overall impact of Muskrat Falls.
Thank you. I think those are fair points. The challenge we've got there is the alternative, and I think we have to, we need energy. And until we reduce our consumption, we're going to need energy. So the question is, what's worse, coal or this project? And I agree that there are sacrifices there that are concerning. But there are also sacrifices to the planet with respect to burning coal. So, these are the best of the worst decisions that we're trying to make. So right now the Liberal Party is saying, the project appears to be going ahead. Newfoundland is going to do this. I don't think Nova Scotia's decision on whether to use this energy is going to stop this project going forward. It's greener energy than what we have, so it seems reasonable to attempt to purchase it. So the Maritime Link is a good solution to take us off the end of the road in terms of the energy grid. So there are advantages for us to put the link in. The concern is that the Liberal Party has had and the URB has had is with the deal. The project's been sold on a blended rate. Most people know this, I think, if you've followed it, but it is a bit complex. There's a market base rate of around 14 cents. Don't quote me on all the numbers, but it's in this range. A base rate for 14 cents for this block of energy, which is equivalent to about 10% of our needs. Then we have the possibility of buying market rate, which is, I think, something around the area of 9. And so it's been sold by the Premier and the NDP party as, a lowest cost, stable form of energy at something like 12 cents. The big problem here is, as the URB discovered in their hearings, is that we have no guarantee to that market-priced energy. So there's a risk there we may never get that reduced rate, and that's why the URB has rejected it, and we're waiting to see if that deal can be renegotiated. My biggest concern reading the Maritime Link Act, it's a 3-page document, is that the variance identified, that's a $1.5 billion project, and the first $60 million, what they call variance in there, is the cost overruns that Emera is responsible for. After that, they are, in that act, allowed to come back to the ratepayers for more money. So if this $1.5 billion project has large cost overruns, as mega projects tend to do, we could be facing much greater than 14 cents cost. And that's where the real risk is. All the risk is being assumed by the ratepayers and not being assumed by Emera. And thank you.
Okay, we need to get off fossil fuels. We need to be with renewable resources. It needs to be solar power. We don't need to be with Emera, who is making a large profit over what we're paying. We all know our Nova Scotia power rates are going up. We don't need to use coal from Colombia and all the devastation that it produces there. We just need to get off fossil fuels. There has to be a will. In Sweden, they decided they were going to get off oil. They didn't have any oil, and the prices were getting higher and higher. They decided they were going to get off oil. So the businesses, the municipal, the provincial, and the federal all got together, and they made a 25-year plan, and that's what they did. I don't know why we can't do it. Maybe we haven't got to the crisis point where we say enough is enough. Well, I mean, we still have the municipal and the provincial. We can still work together on the local level. We don't all live in Alberta. We just have to make changes.
Hi, I'm going to throw you a relatively easy one, but maybe it comes down to the crunch of it in many ways. And that's, as was indicated, I haven't heard anything about climate change on the doors either, and I haven't heard anything about climate change on the doors for years, not just this election. How do we educate our people? I think most of us are on the same page here with respect to the climate, but You know, if you look around this room and subtract everybody over 50, there's not many people left. But that's important because the young people are the people that are going to push this issue and push it hopefully hard. If this was the 70s, there'd be people hanging from the rafters in here, and there just isn't. So what can the four of you comment on about how we can try and educate our young people? Because that's where the change is going to have to come. It ain't going to come from us or our generation. I don't think it is. We can lead, we can help them, but we need to educate them. And that's where I think Efficiency Nova Scotia has been of good value, but I'm open to anything that gets young people to become involved in this, because we're all going to die out one of these days, and the climate's going to be even worse likely. So what could you suggest as ways that we can get our young people more involved in this?
Yeah, that's the question. I think it's you know, the root of the issue is how do we change people's attitudes on this, and I alluded to it in my initial comments. I think we've got to make the story real. I mean, all of us can understand those places and see those images, but I'm not sure most Nova Scotians struggling right now can relate to what's happening in Bangladesh or China or Russia. So I think we need to, you know, work to find the stories here and make them real. Have a real farmer talking about the impact of climate change, or real images about what's happening in coastal erosion, and bring it back home. And, you know, I think you implied some of the answer in your question, and that's to get into the schools and make these issues real for students in terms of it is affecting my home, my neighbors, my people. I think that is probably, off the top of my head, you know, the place to begin. Bringing it back home, and that's, you know, all the, you know. Anyway, thank you.
I think that's an interesting question. I'm not sure I have an answer to it, but you know, the thought that at least the example that began to form for me is the experience that we've had last year and perhaps this with wind energy here in Kings County. And I think, you know, I to get to the end of what I think may be part of the solution is it's providing some leadership in this discussion. We need, and in the process, you know, we had an opportunity in Kings County to have a very good dialogue about what to do with our energy future. And I think but in a sense, we got spooked instead of had a discussion. You know, there were a lot of alarmed people, and Kings County Council, in essence, determined that quite quickly that the solution was to rescind the bylaw that may have made some things possible. But that also effectively dampened the conversation. At least my experience has been that since the bylaw has been withdrawn, we've been all relatively quiet about this. And that's, in my view, harmful. You know, and in fact, the bylaw was withdrawn at a point where there were no, at least on the North Mountain, which I was mostly concerned about, no applications made for any wind turbines. No environmental studies had been done. There were maps circulated that misrepresented, I think, because there were no applications, nobody knew. There was no map to draw. But in essence, we got spooked. And I think we need more leadership to have these discussions. And I think, in part, by setting a target, as we have in Nova Scotia, to create 40% of our electricity by renewable means by 2020, we've provided some leadership. I think that's in a sense, we're forcing the dialogue in that, and I think we need to keep doing that.
Well, at the municipal level, we have the Kings County Municipality and their 2050 program, and at the end of this month, there will be an energy forum where people can be involved, just to make a note of that. For young people to be involved, I think they need to see a change in the thinking strategy that's been pushing our decisions. Over and over again, they have seen projects pushed forward on an economic base without adequate consideration and value being given to the environment and to social considerations. They need to see something like the Genuine Progress Index guiding how we make decisions, looking at all the contributing factors. If we don't incorporate our environmental goals into our financial decisions, we are not going to have sustainable prosperity. We have the Muskrat Falls evaluated and said it's not sustainable. And yet, rather than look at how we can improve efficiencies and conservation in this province, we're looking for how we can continue to feed the high energy demand of our per capita situation in the province. So until young people start to see in their leadership a kind of thinking that they can relate to, where their concerns about the environment are being demonstrated, they aren't going to be attracted to leadership positions. They aren't going to be concerned about voting. They're going to be really feeling a kind of desperation about where we're moving forward, or whether we're moving forward at all or staying backward. If they start to see that kind of thinking of environmental goals incorporated into prosperity decisions, they're going to start to see the green job generation, which we are not seeing in our province yet. And when they start seeing that kind of thinking and they see that job market opening, they're going to be encouraged to participate. I want to remark that Nova Scotia Environmental Network put out a survey of 28 questions for the 4 parties. And if you want to know how young people are going to feel about that, you can look at the report card. The Green Party got A. Every other party got F. There's something terribly wrong when the 3 major parties in the province have not incorporated environmental goals into their thinking, such that even doing an environmental survey, they have failed to incorporate environmental goals and have failed on 28 questions.
How do we educate people? I've been going into school since 2004, and when I go to debates such as this, most people are my age, maybe a little younger, and if I usually target the younger people in the audience afterwards. My sense is the youth are the ones that are going to make the changes. They're going to have to push for them. They're going to live in this world. We have to come off fossil fuels. We have to make sure the sea level doesn't rise. We have to make sure that the planet isn't warmed beyond belief. So we have to go in and educate the schools. There was a wonderful film made recently. Yeah. I believe that the Green Party is a very young party, and I think a lot of the youth that are involved do get it. There are some that don't make the connections and don't make the links. I guess we have to move with the people that do make the connections. I think all parties have to be leaders in the environmental field, and we have to move forward, despite the fact that the federal party is a dinosaur and has its head in the sand and wants Alberta tar sands. We still have to move forward and make our own goals and do what we can.
Thank you. My name is Gary Randall, and I guess my button probably might lead you in the mindset that I'm going in a certain direction. I've been around here in Kings North for 57 years now, right? I don't remember all of it, but I remember probably close to the last 50. I guess this is going to be directed probably at Mr. Irving, and I'm sorry that there aren't others here, but I think you spoke about earlier about investing in the environment, right? That we have to invest into it. And I know by going to houses, there's a lot of people that don't have a lot of money to invest in the environment, let alone invest in keeping the heat on this winter, right? So I'm not sure where all that money's coming from. I look at this government that's been in for 4 years. I look at the fact that they've bought back the Bowater land. You know, the rumor was if they didn't buy it, it may have gone to may not belong to Nova Scotia anymore. Let's put it that way. It may not belong to a person from Canada anymore. It allowed us in Nova Scotia to meet an international commitment, I think, of owning 13% or so of our land and keeping it green. I look at a government that, through Efficiency Nova Scotia, is trying to encourage people to use less electricity, so we don't need to spend as much money on the fossil fuel coal, which our governments in the past had invested very heavily into. Cape Breton, West Drag, bought a mine, blew up a mine, bulldozed down a mine without really mining any amount of coal. Where did our dollars go? The other night in the news, I watched, they say the government shouldn't be making these investments, shouldn't be handing out money to companies. Mink manure has been a problem down southwest Nova, polluting a lot of the rivers and streams and lakes down there for years. The gentleman that was on there said the government's invested in them to actually produce a fuel out of the manure to the point that none of it will be going in the streams and lakes, may not be there yet, to the point that he says there may be a shortage of manure in the future if this all works out the way that they hope that it will. I suggest that probably wasn't invented in Nova Scotia. It was probably invented in Europe where they had this problem years and years and years ago. We don't really need to do all the looking at the wheel. Yeah. Okay. Sydney Tire Ponds, we invested $750,000 in an incinerator and asked me to vote for the people that invested in that incinerator, knowing full well it wouldn't work. Muskrat Falls is as clean probably as we've got. Can you tell me, Mr. Irving, what's going to happen if, and what is the deal that you want for Muskrat Falls to actually go on with the project? And if you don't get the deal that you want, if you become the government representing me, what's the answer to getting off of coal? What is the immediate answer to getting off of coal? Because we have to get there quickly, right? That's what you people are saying. We got to get there. So what's the answer?
Well, I think there's lots of options. You know, we need a deal that's fair and good and fixed. I mean, clearly, I don't think this deal right now, it's a blank check. It's a blank check. We don't know how much this project is going to cost. There in fact is, with Emera having a guaranteed rate of return, and I have a friend at Nova Scotia Power says it's not guaranteed, but it's a range that the URB gives them. They're not even motivated to bring this in on budget. The more money this costs, the more profit they will make. So we've got a project that the structure of the deal is bad. And what we need to be doing is looking at all our options, right? And I think we've talked about those options, wind and solar and tidal. Let's examine this. This is a deal for 35 years. I think we've got to be very, very careful with what we do with that deal. Newfoundland has regretted for years their deal with Hydro-Quebec. And now we are being told that anything to do with Hydro-Quebec is dealing with Darth Vader, right? It's the deal. It wasn't Hydro-Quebec. It was the deal that Newfoundland signed. And right now, Nova Scotia is in that position of potentially signing a deal that has the potential to hurt us. I think what we're all talking about here is to look at solutions. And I mean, I just thought, maybe Muskrat Falls isn't the way to go. And I think it was from the comments of the Green Party when I just looked at, 35 years, $1.5 billion. That's $42 million a year. $42 million a year. What if we had a program investing in our buildings and leveraging the private sector with $42 million? How much energy savings could we create? And I think that's what we've got to do when we're looking at mega projects and the amount of money of $1.5 billion. So I don't know if that idea has any merit at all. I just came up with it here. No one's talked about it, but that's come out of just thinking a little bit harder about what we're doing. This is what I think we've got to do, is when we look at these large projects and these large deals with corporations, that we have to evaluate what else could we do with that money? What else could we do in Port Hawkesbury with $124 million? Yes, there were 300 jobs, but what else could we do? Before we make those deals, let's examine it. Thank you.
It'll have to be brief. It would be. Hold on. Can I pass this up?
Jim, I'm really curious about ways that we could foster cross-party cooperation to progress some of these ideas.
Well, I guess what I would say to that is that's what we're doing at this very moment. We're fostering some dialogue, and that's a good thing. That's also what the legislature is about. There are many opportunities to do that. I think sometimes what might seem and might actually be acrimonious in the legislature is also another kind of dialogue. I think everybody listens. And so when people put forward their good ideas, they're noticed. And they may even be incorporated in somebody else's policy. I think one of the difficulties in our system is that opposition parties are less inclined to put forward their best thinking because it might get stolen by the current government in power, and so that is a complication in the way that things work. But I think we need to have lots and lots of dialogue, and we need to find forums like this and many others for that to happen. Could I say one other thing, though, that hasn't been said here tonight? That one of the things that's really gotten in the way of our ability to resolve some of these issues is that Nova Scotia Power was actually sold in 1992. That was a really bad decision. I think it's handicapped us in lots of ways, and we're, in a sense, we are living with the result of a privatization decision 21 years later, and we need to be careful we don't do that in other areas too.
And I just want to mention, with respect to Anna Maria's question, that if you go to observe the committee work at the provincial level, I think you can be quite proud of the inter-party work there. I have been very pleased to see the kind of shared thinking and freedom of discussion on policies from all parties at committee level. So that encourages me.
I believe we all have to work together. We all have to live on this planet. So unless we do work together, we won't move forward. There is no, I guess from 2004, we've been trained as Green Party candidates not to fight with the other parties, just to put forward our platform, our ideas. Because fighting is counterproductive. We have to work together. It's not a matter of who wins. We all have to work together and move forward to get off fossil fuels. So I don't see it as a winning or losing. We just have to do it. We have to get ahead. It's not a matter of whose idea it is even. It just has to be done.
I agree, and I think the discussion needs to go just beyond. Here we are at the provincial level. I think it would be wonderful after the election that we sit down with municipal politicians and MPs and have this kind of discussion. To tackle this as a society, we need all levels of government to work together. In reality, I think the federal government got frustrated with provincial governments and started working directly with municipalities through the Green Municipal Funds. And because municipalities are the product of the provinces, and the provinces are strapped for cash, municipalities have nothing to do, have no money to do anything, and so it's clear to me that we need to get all three levels of government working together. And going back to my earlier comment, let's look at this as a region, not just Kings County. Let's look at all of the Annapolis Valley and get our MPs, MLAs, and councillors together. And Edith, I'm sure you could lead us through a productive evening. Thank you.
Thank you, party candidates, for coming out. No, thanks for coming. Oh, yes, I am so sorry. I need to put a plug in for the film Switch that will be playing October 22nd at the Al Whittle Theater at 7 o'clock.
Switch is a film that was made to examine energy options in the future. And it's a big project that's supported by the Technology Museum of Canada, amongst other things. And it's a real good chance to look at some of what's happening in the field of the future of all kinds of energy.
And there will be discussion after that movie, too. So this will carry on.